Jamie, the waiting room slowed down. I think we've reached a critical mass, so you can go ahead and go.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to our third installment of our Lunch and Learn webinar series here put on by Smokefree Tennessee. We really appreciate you being here. The theme for our webinar today is smoke-free storytelling. And it's touching about how we can amplify our advocates' voices to help educate, empower, and drive policy change through storytelling. To do a little icebreaker, if you could drop your name, your organization, and thinking about stories, maybe your favorite fairy tale or fable, or if you need the easier version of that, your favorite Disney movie, but drop that into the chat so everybody knows who's here and gets to know a little bit about yourself. We've got some amazing speakers, panelists on today's webinar. I'm going to give you the quick rundown here. We have Gustavo Torres from the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids. He has been involved in the tobacco control movement for the past 25 years. As a young adult, Gustavo served on the Legacies National Speakers Bureau and the National Activism Council, and in 2012, he was recognized for his efforts with a Trailblazers Award for outstanding and continuous leadership in the tobacco control movement by Legacy. Currently, Gustavo is the Director of Youth Advocacy for the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, where he oversees the development and implementation of innovative youth-focused programs, including Taking Down Tobacco, the 4-time award-winning online youth advocacy training program. We also have Nate Rao. He is a journalist for Axios Nashville. He has a granular knowledge of Nashville's government and power brokers, having spent more than a decade with the Tennessean, navigating the ins and outs of government deals as an investigative reporter. During his career at the Tennessean and the City Paper, he covered the music industry and metro government and won praise for hard-hitting series on concussions in youth sports and deaths at a Tennessee drug rehabilitation center. In a state of Titans and Vols fans, Nate is an unabashed Green Bay Packers and Chicago Cubs fan, and we are all fans of his writing. Jacob Black will also be as part of this webinar. He is the epidemiologist at the Tennessee Department of Health, where he is responsible for programmatic evolution and epidemiologic support for the tobacco control program. Say that 5 times fast. In his role, Jacob has assisted in transitioning the tobacco control program to become truly data-driven with a strategic focus towards policy, systems, and environmental change interventions. Jacob earned a master's degree in public health with a concentration in health policy from the University of Alabama at Birmingham. Mozetta Jackson is coming to us from the American Heart Association, where she is the Vice President of Community Impact and Health Strategies at the Middle Tennessee AHA. A native Californian, Jackson received her BA from UC Berkeley and has been a nonprofit public health leader for over 15 years. She has lived and worked in multiple states, implementing location-specific strategies and non-traditional partnerships. Her career includes leadership roles at American Red Cross, March of Dimes, American Cancer Society, and now AHA. In her current role, she has implemented public health policy, systems, and environmental sustainable changes that have impacted over 850,000 residents of Tennessee. Lastly, not leastly, Pete Nacarelli, coming to us from New Jersey, is one of the co-founders of the quickly growing national coalition called CEASE, which stands for Casino Employees Against Smoking Effects. He has been working in the table games department of the casino industry for 26 years, enduring the effects of secondhand smoke throughout his entire career. When the COVID pandemic hit and smoking was temporarily eliminated in casinos, it was a breath of fresh air for him. But after smoking was allowed to return, him and a small group of casino employees formed the group CEASE, and this group has grown to over 2,000 members strong nationally, is now fighting to get rid of smoking permanently inside of casinos across the country, and specifically for Pete in New Jersey. So as you can see, we've got an amazing group of panelists that are going to make for a really compelling and interesting perspectives on storytelling and how that can impact our advocacy and our organizations. So if you've attended our webinars before, the way we like to format this is we do a little lay of the land data presentation. Then we go to a spotlight session that kind of focuses on some great work happening locally here in Tennessee. And then we kick it to a panel at the end where I'll moderate, ask some questions as it pertains to this theme, and we'll really get into the weeds there. So I will pass the hot mic to our Duke of Data, our Earl of Epidemiology, Mr. Jacob Black.
Thanks, Jamie. So hi, everybody. I am Jacob Black. Like Jamie mentioned, I'm the Epi and Evaluator for the Tennessee Department of Health's Tobacco Control Program. And I've been asked to speak with you all today to kind of highlight how we use data for storytelling, which is one of my favorite things to do. It's part of my job every day to take data that otherwise would probably put people to sleep and instead try and put together a kind of cogent, story that is compelling and helps bring people or call people to action. Let's go to the next slide. So for the example today, I wanted to highlight one of my favorite kind of little stories here. So it is this chart is looking at youth smoking and comparing it in Tennessee to the US. This is current high school students reporting current smoking in the past 30 days. This chart looks back over the past 20 years from 2003 up to about 2021. So the first thing that you'll notice is that we've made significant and substantial progress over those past 20 years, right? We went from in 2003, about 28% of high school students in Tennessee reporting current smoking, so more than 1 in 4, down to less than 5% now. In the US as a whole, we went from 22% or a little over 1 in 5 down to under 4%. Now, beyond that, that progress that we've made over the past 20 years, the item that stuck out to me whenever I look at this graph is when we look back in 2003 and up till about 2007, there was a 6 percentage point gap or so between us and the United States. And I think you all are pretty familiar with, if you're familiar with Tennessee's health rankings at all, this is kind of typical, right? We're typically at the back of the pack, a good little ways behind the national average, typically 45th, 47th, whatever in national health rankings, depending on what you're looking at. What was weird is looking at, in 2007, that 6 percentage point gap still very much existed. But by 2009, that percentage gap had dropped to within about 2%, or 2 percentage points. And by 2013, it had been eliminated entirely. And since then, we've remained within about a percentage point of the national average. So how did that happen, right? How did we close that gap? How did we go from a 6 percentage point gap in 2009 to less than 2 in 6% in 2007, less than 2 in 2009, and then less than 1 ever since 2013. So if you go to the next slide, being the resident nerd for TDH, I looked at even more data. So this looks at annual cigarette consumption per capita. So that's the number of packs smoked per person in Tennessee from 1987 to 2019. And what you'll also see here is that we've made significant progress from about 130 packs per person in Tennessee in 1987 down to about 55 to 60 in 2019. The big piece that stood out, and I felt like I needed to put an arrow because if it wasn't already obvious, is this huge kind of precipitous drop that we saw between 2007 and 2008, right? So this immediately brought questions of what in the world happened that year, and how did we see this kind of huge drop overnight? Next slide. So I looked at this is the same chart, so it's still cigarette tax, annual cigarette consumption per capita, but I also overlaid a layer of cigarette tax rates for the state here in Tennessee. So those are on the right-hand side and the kind of light blue bar in the background. And what this is basically showing is that from 1987 up to 2002, our cigarette tax rate was 13 cents per pack. In 2002, it bumped up to 20 cents per pack. And then in 2007, it jumped up to 62 cents per pack. And it's been that ever since for the past 15 or so years. Now, what I highlighted in the cigarette consumption, the red line here, is that in those years where there was a cigarette tax increase, the dotted lines are the single year changes, right? From 2007 to 2008 is the big one on the right-hand side. And essentially what we saw was that whenever we tripled that tax rate, right? We went from 20 cents up to 62 cents. We saw a precipitous drop in a single year. We saw, I think it was around 35% drop in cigarette consumption, basically within a single year period. Put another way, we saw the same we made the same amount of progress in 1 year following that cigarette tax increase as we had between 1987 and 2002. Put a third way, we made 15 years of progress in 1 year following that cigarette tax increase. And I promise this in the first chart relate. If you go to the next slide, the way that we got from a 6 percentage point gap in 2007 to less than 2% in 2009, and to close that gap entirely by 2013 is because of the evidence-based policies that we implemented in Tennessee. It's not solely due to the cigarette tax increase, but a huge portion of it is due to the cigarette tax increase in 2007. So I hope that if nothing else, this was a little bit entertaining, but also to highlight and point out that the policy work that we do here in Tennessee makes it possible for us to catch up, right? We're so used to being at the back of the pack or being well behind the national average, but this goes to show that we can absolutely close that gap. We went from, in 2007, effectively 48th in the country for youth smoking, and by 2009, we were 39th. We went 9 places up over the course of 2 years following one policy change. And I think if we continue to apply those same evidence-based policies to the issues we're facing today, like e-cigarettes, that we can continue to make progress and improve the health and well-being of all of our residents. I hope I didn't go too far over. So I'll turn it over to you now. Thanks.
Fantastic, Jacob. Thank you so much. And I think it's really fascinating that, oftentimes data can get has a rap in Tennessee where, oh, we've heard the same data over and over again. But when you present it in that way and tell the story behind the data, it's really compelling. And like you said, when you think about how that story can apply to things like e-cigarettes here, where we have zero tax, that might be a very quick path to solving a really big problem here in Tennessee. So thanks for that, Jacob. That's really interesting, really compelling. So this will bring us to our next part of the webinar, which is our spotlight session, where we like to highlight some great local work happening within the theme. And this theme, as you all know, is smoke-free storytelling. The spotlight session of this webinar is pretty close to home, and pretty close to home for this coalition, and it is Musicians for a Smoke-Free Tennessee. It is where this coalition was born from. It is now a program of our coalition as we grew and grew and became the official statewide coalition for tobacco control and prevention. But this is where it began. Gosh, about 4 years ago. So I wanted to tell the story of that, and particularly because it's so rooted in storytelling and how it grew our coalition and amplified voices of real Tennesseans and changed policy. So next slide, Tracy. So it all began in 2020 amidst the pandemic, when we were inspired by some amazing work happening with the Smoke-Free Music Cities program, which is a program of the American Non-Smokers' Rights Foundation. And the work they were doing amplifying musician voices in Austin, New Orleans, and Atlanta to drive change and get rid of smoking inside music venues and bars. And as a musician myself, and someone that battles asthma, it had been a thorn in my side for my whole career. And I still just couldn't believe that as Music City, USA, we were allowing smoking to happen in music venues and endanger a group of people who drive so much economic impact for this state and drive so much tourism for this state. So we were really inspired by Smoke-Free Music Cities. They reached out, we started collaborating, and we formed a local version of this video series called the Smoke-Free Sessions, where we provided a stipend to musicians across the state who were stuck at home during the pandemic, off the road. And we provided them an opportunity to say, hey, play a show at home, record it, and tell us about how you feel about smoking in venues and whether or not playing in a smoke-free environment is important to you, and what playing in a smoke-filled environment is like for you. And the stories we collected, the performances we collected for this series were so interesting and compelling, and everyone was a little different. We had saxophone players talking about not being able to breathe. We had singer-songwriters losing their voices halfway through shows. We had other people whose merchandise smelled like smoke and they had to stop and do their laundry in the middle of a tour. So all these things we hadn't thought about that really served to open our eyes to the real stories of what real musicians were going through in Tennessee in this space that a lot of people didn't realize or think about. Next slide, Tracy. Within these stories, we were able to capture these quotes and testimonials. And so the videos themselves were great social media content and great to kind of spread awareness about what we were doing and this issue that a lot of people were kind of leaving behind. And then we were able to take that and capture further stories within it. So artists like Mary Gaucher and Jenny Lee, we grabbed the quotes from their videos and turned them into social media content that they could share, that we could share, that our partners in the coalition as it grew could share to tell these stories and open people's eyes to what was happening. Next slide. These stories also then translated to the legislature as we were realizing what needed to happen in order to change this policy. It first started at the state level, where we needed to repeal preemption and return local control to cities to make these stronger laws. These stories were the thing that really moved the needle at the Capitol. As a musician myself, I was able to testify in the House Health Committee, as you see there. We were also able to share our social media graphics with legislators, and we were able to actually collect video testimonials from artists like Rachel McIntyre Smith there from Chattanooga, who couldn't make the drive to the Capitol, but wanted to advocate, and we played her video to legislators from her district who were moved by that and whose votes changed because they saw their constituents were being left behind and weren't being treated the same as almost everybody else in their workplaces. Next slide. That core of storytelling that began as videos, turned into social media, also then applied to a media campaign we did as we were pushing forward with legislation and building our coalition. This idea and the messaging around music and this being a workplace argument and issue, we were able to do billboard campaigns called 3 Chords and the Truth. Tennessee is not smoke-free in all music venues and bars, to highlight that to people and also highlight that Tennessee is known for music, not secondhand smoke, right? So we were able to tie that thread of storytelling through videos, through social media, through real media, print media, and earned media. Tracy, next slide. What I also found is that these stories of real musicians were also compelling enough for other storytellers, people in the press, to find interesting and want to tell their stories through their own medium. And as you see here, the stories of what we did and the stories of the artists coming together for this coalition and this movement were covered in everywhere from Rolling Stone to NPR to Axios. Nate Rao's on this webinar, and he might be able to talk a little bit about that later on. But all in all, the core of it was storytelling. It started with the stories of real Tennesseans, of musicians who also happened to be storytellers themselves. And those stories then had all the windmills going from social media to paid media to earned media. But the core of it was stories. And I think that it's important to remember as we look back and why that campaign was so successful and how we now have a new state law and local laws being passed in places like Nashville and Hendersonville, and hopefully soon in Memphis and Knoxville. And as we do those local campaigns, focusing on the stories, and as your work, whether it's with youth, whether it's with people trying to quit, think about real stories, think about how it impacts their lives and how you can tell their stories in a way that inspire other people to take action in a similar way. So that wraps the spotlight session portion of this. And brings it to our panel time, y'all. If I had a sound effect thing, I'd be like, pew, 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 panel time. As I mentioned, we have some amazing panelists here with us today. We have Gustavo Torres, Nate Rao, Mozetta Jackson, and Pete Nacarelli, all coming with us to share their perspectives. I have the honor of moderating this. So I'm going to ask a few questions to all of you, and then I will direct in which order they get answered, just to keep it easy, because I know it can be a little confusing here on Zoom. But I will kick it off with sort of a more general question to give you a chance to talk about your work as well. But tell us a bit about how you and your organizations utilize storytelling as part of your day-to-day work. So I'll start with you, Mozetta.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep, sound great.
Awesome, awesome. So at the American Heart Association, one of our guiding values is meeting people where they are. And one of the best ways that we can meet people where they are is really giving out health education and information and public awareness in ways that really resonate with the public and really resonate with people. And so that's one of our main goals is to always have, personal stories that really explain whether it's, the reason for managing your blood pressure or the reason to quit smoking or the reason to eat healthy, any of those, we want to have people giving their personal stories so it can really resonate with the public and we can meet people where they are.
I love that. Pete, let's go to you. Tell us a little about how you utilize storytelling.
Hey, Jamie, thanks for having me here. So I'm with Casino Employees Against Smoking Effects way up here in New Jersey. And we are trying to get smoking out of the casinos up here. So we have to tell stories to a bunch of different people. We have to tell, what we do is we tell our a life in a day of a dealer, and what we have to go through with the smoking, and how we can't turn around, and how the smoke's blowing directly in our face. And we have to do that for 8 hours. And we tell about, pregnant women dealing on a game. And we tell about people with oxygen tanks having to walk to the game and deal with smoke being blown in their face. And so we tell that to legislators, we tell that to the media, which is big. And so that's how we use storytelling in our organization.
Fantastic. And I think I just saw your story on CNBC this morning on Squawk Box. So
Yeah, we were there.
You guys are doing a pretty good job of telling that story. All right, Nate, I'll kick it to you.
Hey, Jamie, thanks for inviting me to be here. I enjoyed Jacob's presentation. That sounds like it would be a good story, actually. I'm sure it's been told, but I'll reach out after this. So I've been a journalist in Nashville for since 2002, and my answer to this question about how I utilize storytelling is different now than it would have been at any other point in my career because of where I work. I work at Axios, which uses the smart brevity model or format to tell stories. And that means that we try to give people the day's news for Nashville in about 900 words each day, each weekday. Our newsletter is free, and it's kind of what do you need to know in your community really fast in the morning. It hits people's inboxes at about 6:30. So it gives us a chance to tell a wide array of stories in a really bite-sized, digestible format each day.
I love that. And I'm an avid reader of that morning newsletter. And for someone like that, I love the digestible, bite-sized way. It's a great way in this fast-moving world. All right, Gustavo, I'll kick it to you for last on this question.
Hello, everyone. Well, as we know here at the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, when young people speak, adults listen. And so when we talk about storytelling and utilizing it as a powerful tool for advocacy, it's important for us to really engage with young people's initiatives and young people's stories first, which really requires us to be the listeners to them and how tobacco is impacting their environments, but further how we mobilize communities around this work. And so a lot of instances, it's about providing that space for young people to be able to speak authentically about the issues that are impacting their community, and then cultivating those tools and resources to help engage them and build their confidence to not only work on this issue, but hopefully to build their confidence throughout any issue they see within their community throughout their lifetime. So it really is a fundamental core-based resource and skills development tool that we want to utilize well beyond our issue, really focused on the young person or the advocates that we're working alongside to really strengthen a movement that hopefully visions us for a greater world overall.
I love that. I love that. You guys do some amazing storytelling with youth. Speaking of which, I'm gonna stand you, Gustavo, and we'll go in the reverse order here, like it's a fantasy football draft, or we'll call it fantasy webinar draft here. And tell me about like one of the more compelling individual stories you've seen or personally told at the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, that's inspired advocacy or policy change in the last few years.
Well, this continues to evolve, and I think timely stories, I think, are the ones that have the most amount of impact. But for me, I think about some of our young people who draw that emotional connection to why they're engaged in this issue, and stories that have really invoked those emotions and empathy in ways that facts and figures can't necessarily do are the ones that stand out the most to me. And so that's why we really encourage young people to share their personal stories and anecdotes related to the advocacy issue. So really making it timely and that interconnectivity of the two, to really create that strong emotional connection with their audience that helps to inspire them to take action, right? And so tonight is our Youth Advocates of the Year Awards Gala, and a little sneak peek into the story that the young man who is our very first National Youth Advocacy Award recipient was saying, centered around him and his grandfather in playing chess and connecting over a chessboard that was riddled with coughing spits from his grandfather's years and years of tobacco use. And so drawing those personal connections are the ones that continue to anchor me and why I show up every day and do the work I do, but further why others listen about the impact that young people are experiencing, and how we are going to address that then through policy systems change.
Amazing. Thanks so much for sharing that. And that story reminds me too a bit. I think I heard the health commissioner in Tennessee tell a story somewhat similar, that as a doctor, he treated an elderly gentleman for a course of his life and had tried to convince him to quit smoking over and over again. And the person that was able to convince him to quit smoking was his grandson, ultimately, during times like that, hanging out, playing chess, bonding, and saying, I don't want you to do that anymore. So the power of youth is real in that storytelling. All right, Nate, tell us about one of your favorite stories you've seen or covered.
Well, I feel like the purest journalist answer to this would be some investigative story I've done that has led to policy changes. Excuse me. And I've definitely had a few of those, but I was thinking about this through the lens of Jamie inviting me to be on this panel. And I'm pretty sure I was one of the first journalists to report on Musicians for a Smoke-Free Tennessee's effort. And I think there's something really satisfying about starting a story in its infancy and following it all the way through when it becomes a policy. And that was definitely the case with the indoor smoking ban and at venues. And you think about it from the point where it was really an idea all the way through Nashville winning a national award for public health because of its indoor smoking ban. So that was definitely one that I would put, high on my list.
I love that. And just out of curiosity, what was it about it that drew your attention to it initially? What makes an interesting story to you in the press stand apart from something else like that?
Well, part of it is, my job is a relationship business, and you and I have a relationship that went back for several years. So when someone I trust comes to me with a story idea, I'm going to perk up and listen. But this was something that was at the intersection of several, beats I've had in my life. I was the local government reporter. I'm married to a musician. I was the music business reporter for a long time. So this was actually an issue that I knew a lot about. My wife is definitely the kind of person where if we pass a convertible and they're smoking, she's going to say something to the guy. And she's played in many of those smoky venues. So this was an issue that I knew would resonate with people in Nashville.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing that, Nate. And thanks for covering us from the beginning. I think it came through multiple publications that you were a part of, and you're helping us tell the story, helped us move the needle and tell the story to legislators and to other outlets as well. So thank you. All right, Pete, tell us about maybe one of your favorite stories that you've told, or maybe more compelling stories that you've seen move the needle there in New Jersey with some of the advocates within CEAS.
Yeah, James, it's interesting, as I'm sitting here listening about storytelling, it hits me that, storytelling, there's stories that inspire, which we hear, but there's also the stories that we tell are more like the gloom that we deal with and the tough situations. So it's interesting how stories can move the needle even in at different ways and different angles. I think the way we inspire people with stories in my organization is just by coming out and telling stories. It keeps people, it makes workers less afraid. We're a grassroots organization, and the more groundswell we get from those people, the better chance we have. And so by coming out and telling the stories, any story, in public and out there, it inspires them to feel like they're comfortable enough to do it as well. So that's one way we inspire people. But one of the stories that I think the most compelling story we tell to legislators, especially, and the media. One of our co-founders, Nicole Vitola, she's a sister in arms here. She tells the story of when she was pregnant, dealing in a small, high limit room to a professional basketball player who had his entourage with him and 6 cigars, blowing smoke directly at her, room filled with smoke. And she tells the legislators that she feels bad to this day about what she did to her unborn child, and she feels guilty, how she allowed that to happen to her unborn child, and that the casinos make you. You have no choice but to get on that game or you don't work. And so, anyway, that's one of the more compelling stories that I think she tells that we try to get in there, because it just kind of really hammers home the point that the workers aren't really cared for by the industry, and we have to get no smoking or they're going to allow stuff like that to happen.
Yeah, man, that's really compelling, and it makes me recall when we were in the midst of the Smoke-Free Nashville movement and campaign, and a bunch of people brought up, oh, what about the bars that don't have music? What you shouldn't worry about those. Let them be. And through that process, a bartender emerged who was pregnant and said that she had to quit her job because of that reason right there. And that I remember that one story changed the views of a whole slew of Nashville council members who were considering grandfathering in all dive bars, but then realized that, oh, there are workers beyond musicians that work at these establishments as well.
Yeah,
And
no doubt.
they're put in that position like Nicole was for C's. So thanks for sharing.
Absolutely.
Mozetta, love to get your take on what's one of your favorite or most compelling stories you've encountered at in your time.
Absolutely. So, when you're working on an advocacy campaign, you definitely want to get, strong and widespread grassroots support. And one of the ways we did that in the Smoke Free Atlanta campaign was that when we went out to different meetings and speaking engagements, we brought with us one of the members of the Atlanta Blues Society. His name is Louis McTush, and probably some of you on the call know him. But him being able to tell the story of a personal musician, friends of his that had COPD from, performing in smoke-filled bars, that him being able to tell that personal story and how it affected their life and their inability, some of them, to perform music subsequently, really, really moved people. And Jamie, just because of the example that you gave, I'll add the second kind of main, kind of larger scale story we told around the necessity for smoke-free bars was the fact that all workers deserve to be in a smoke-free environment. And so it was, both of those, those messages, the personal story of musicians, some of them losing their livelihood and their health because of smoke-filled bars or smoke-filled venues. And then also that everyone deserves the right to work in a smoke-free environment. And that was definitely something that resonated with lots of people.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mozetta. That's amazing. And it's, really cool to see how music has been driven the conversation in so many cities, especially cities that take so much pride in music like that too. All right, next question here. Right now, what is your favorite platform or medium to either tell a story or view a story? Gustavo, I'll start with you on this one. Oh, you're muted. Sorry.
Thanks. Sorry about that. This is one that is very generational. Obviously, you know, we have a variety of different people on the call. But for me, I really am a big fan of that individual face-to-face stories. But obviously, there's so many different tools to tell stories, whether it's through social media, through YouTube, or through Facebook or Instagram, to TikTok, and or even through sites like X. For me personally, I really, nothing will ever beat being in a room face to face with folks, listening to a story, feeling the emotions and that connection that's received. So I'll leave it with that.
All right, awesome. I am curious, as someone who works with a lot of youth, have you seen success in storytelling through TikTok?
Well, so we have been seeing success, but the success doesn't come from us curating for them, rather than curating the content and then providing it back to us, right? And so I think tools or sites such as TikTok that are very timely, relevant to young people's initiatives today, are really great mediums for the specific audiences of which are represented on those sites. That's why I do encourage us to do scans of our social media channels to understand who our audience is, who is really following us, to ensure that our messaging then is aligning with those followers, and or if those followers aren't the ones that we're looking to reach, how do we then look at other channels and avenues to better reach that specific target?
Awesome. Pete, what's your favorite medium for telling a story right now?
Well, it's funny you mentioned TikTok, because today I signed up for my first TikTok account. Cease has gone TikTok, but we got a younger person helping us, so we can help figure that out. But that's kind of I guess a younger generational thing. But we do most of we gathered all our members. We have over 3,000 members in New Jersey alone, all gathered through Facebook. So we do a lot of storytelling on Facebook to our members, through our members. But I'm going to agree with Gustavo. I think the face-to-face medium is best for us. We talk to reporters face-to-face. We talk to legislators face-to-face. So we do a lot of face-to-face storytelling in our line of work.
I love that. And you're right, the impact of face-to-face, there's nothing compares to that, right? And it's
Agreed.
hard to get to maneuver out of an uncomfortable conversation too when it's right there.
Also, I'm sorry.
Oh, please.
No, I was going to say, I mentioned Nicole before, our co-sponsor, but she gets very passionate on subjects, you know, and sometimes tears come, sometimes yelling happens, and it really, and it's pure emotion, and it really, really shows the person you're talking to an emotion and what you're feeling in a way that Facebook or whatever can't. So it is really a great medium for storytelling, I think.
Through that. And I will say, as someone who's observed and been cheering on Cease from Tennessee, I've been amazed by how much engagement y'all get on Facebook groups specifically. It feels like a sort of niche thing that maybe a lot of people don't utilize that much, but the engagement, the conversations, the stories that people are sharing, the photos people are sharing within that, it's really cool to see. And it's something that I recommended to other people because I've seen the success that y'all have had with that specifically up there. So I think that's an interesting and maybe road less traveled amidst the storytelling avenues. All right, Nate, I know that obviously your allegiances are with the written story here, but I'm going to make you choose another path. If it wasn't for a news article, how else would you like to digest a story?
Well, my answer to this is a little, I guess, tangential to, I think, the way you're asking the question. But as part of my job, I have to, for better or worse, I talk to a lot of like government operative type people. And a lot of times they have their story idea and we talk about it. And then the conversation is, did you hear what the mayor's doing? Or did you hear about what this lawmaker is doing? But one thing that I really enjoyed about getting to know you, Jamie, was we'd get done talking about maybe a policy-based story. And the next thing was, did I ever tell you about the time I opened for Huey Lewis? Or did I ever tell you about the time I was playing on a tour in Wisconsin? So my answer to this is songs. I think that like music is what connects us in so many ways. And you heard, Mazzetta's answer about how hearing how musicians affected does resonate with people. So I like to, when I get to really know someone, know like what kind of music they like or what songs they're listening to.
I love that. And as a musician, I think that we're, we're storytellers at heart, right? And I forgot even that in the beginning of our campaign, we did a campaign song and had 8 different artists sing on that. And that was one of the first things I think that you covered actually way back in the day. That was our kind of first statement on like, let's put out a song and see if other people are interested. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. And music is the great thing that brings people together. And I think the bipartisan support that we've seen in Tennessee around this issue was a big part because of music and people realizing that they need to support the music community that way.
I think in some cases you had lawmakers who were musicians, so they had experienced it firsthand, indoor smoking.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite stories to tell about our legislative process there, because I think we really caught people by surprise. There's 19 lobbyists in the state of Tennessee employed by Big Tobacco, and there was 2 of us up at the Capitol at the time working this, and I don't think anyone thought we had a chance in hell of passing anything there. And suddenly we had enough votes in the Commerce Committee to get through, and it's because the Senate Majority Leader in Tennessee, who is a staunch libertarian Republican that everyone thought would be against this, also moonlights in a honky-tonk band and understood this personally. And suddenly that swayed things and people were like, whoa, what just happened? But it's understanding that story of where that person comes from and trying to find that common ground, I think. Mozetta, do you have a favorite platform or medium?
Yeah, so I think like when we're talking to legislators or maybe even heads of companies, certain types of audiences, I totally agree that, or even small groups of people, I agree that in person is really the best method. However, I feel like when you're trying to get like, the message out to multiple people, I really enjoy social media. And I'm kind of chuckling over here because it's going to show my age. And when I worked on the Smokefree Atlanta campaign, it was back in 2016. So we did lots of ads on Facebook where we were able to focus in on particular zip codes where we were trying to move the needle. But then also we did a commercial. We were able to record a commercial that played on Pandora. So I know no one probably uses Pandora anymore. But Pandora, and then even to go even more old school, thinking about the power of music, those old school public service announcements, free public service announcements that used to get played on radios, and I guess people are probably still doing that. So definitely those are my favorite in that Pandora ad particularly.
I love it. And Pandora is one of those funny things where I think people are like, oh yeah, that's older and not that many people are on there, but there's still like millions of people on that platform. And there are people that find that. And I think roads less traveled are oftentimes ways that end up catching more attention to start too. And I think that's a cool platform and something I hadn't thought of. So all right, yeah, so we got one more. Oh, sorry, Mozetta, you're gonna say one more thing?
Oh, I just wanted to say I'm personally proud of myself because I have upgraded from Pandora to Tidal. So
Yeah, that's the highest level of music quality. It sounds the best there.
okay, great.
Okay, well, we got one more question, but before I ask it, I just wanted to give this opportunity. If anybody has questions for any of our panelists, drop them in the chat. And after this question, I'll circle back to anything that might be relevant or be answered in the chat. So this is your opportunity to drop that in there if you're dying to ask them anything in particular. But my last question here is just, how do you think organizations could better use storytelling to drive change? A lot of people on this call are from local health departments or run local coalitions and are working on their own localized campaigns. And if you could give them one piece of advice on how to utilize storytelling in a kind of tangible way, what would that be? And Nate, I'll start with you on this one.
This is one where I'm a really firm believer in Axios's approach to sharing information. I think that the smart brevity format of saying what you have to say concisely and sticking really to the facts is it resonates. And honestly, I hear from pretty big organizations and companies in our city that have embraced that format for their press releases, for their internal communications. I know if you're trying to reach a journalist, I sadly don't have time to read long press releases or long pitches, or I might not have time to meet in person. So if you can convey it to me really quickly, what the story is, why it's going to affect people, that really goes a long way.
I love that. Yeah, brevity is huge these days, especially with all the things that are distracting us and taking up time, right? Awesome. Pete, what how do you think organizations could best use storytelling if you have one thing you could recommend?
First, I want to say, Mazetta, I don't even know what title is, so you're way ahead of me in that realm. I don't know. I'm not sure. Like, we're kind of new at this advocacy. We've been at this at 3 or 4 years. I'm not sure what other people could do better in storytelling. I know that we found that the media driven storytelling is really big for us personally. I think we could be better at newer types of social media like TikTok or Instagram or whatever the kids are using today, because we're kind of stuck in our ways and don't really know how to use that stuff, and we're trying to learn because I think it reaches more people. And finally, I think Jamie, you've helped us with this as well. Short edited videos, they're really big for us because as you guys have said, people don't sit down and read a newspaper anymore. They don't want an hour-long story. So a quick 30-second video of us telling our story, people will watch and it'll resonate before they move on. So I think there may be 3 kind of instances where storytelling could be big.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm a big champion of the short high quality video for sure. I think that's
Absolutely.
All right, Mozetta, how about you?
Yeah, when I think about my career and multiple organizations I've worked for, when I take a step back, big picture, I think the main thing for me is for organizations to, one, understand the power of storytelling, 2, execute on storytelling, and 3, make it a priority with funding, like, create positions where people can focus in on storytelling or telling the organization's story. And then, kind of along with that, understanding the importance of, marketing communications. And I always, like when we talk about the public health conversation, I always talk about look at the power of the mammogram campaign. Like most women go and get mammograms now, and that was around a public education campaign, very intentional public education campaign. So.
Great points. Yeah, if you're not valuing it from the beginning and budgeting for it, it's hard to support it, right? So you got to really think right at the foundational level that way. That's great reminder, great advice. All right, Gustavo, I think you're last on this question.
Awesome. Well, I think there's a couple things I do want to leave with folks here. First off, we need to ensure that through our initiatives that we're preserving culture and identity as part of storytelling, understanding that storytelling not only serves as a tool for advocacy, but also a means to preserve culture, heritage, community identity of any of the communities of which we serve. The intersectionality of our issue needs to be continuously brought into this work to really embrace community and the intersectionality as a way that helps to create that interconnectivity of all the different social identities that exist within our communities that we are working within, and really how we encourage youth to really explore how various aspects of their identity, such as race, gender, sexuality, and ability, intersects with the different advocacy topics of which we care about. So. And then the last kind of piece is really that long-term engagement. It's important for us to really recognize that storytelling is a long-term engagement strategy when it comes to advocacy, not just a one-time effort that we put into this work. So by providing that ongoing support, resources, and platforms for whether it's young people or your community-based partners as storytellers to continue sharing this narrative and driving change is paramount in the work that we do. It helps to cultivate a culture of storytelling within the advocacy organizations, schools, communities, and systems of which we are engaging with that will in turn have a long-term impact over time. And so those are kind of my three main components that I would just recommend. And in closing, just say by really empowering youth and community-based advocates, legislators become storytellers for advocacy. It's critical not only for this moment in time and the initiatives that we're working on, but ensuring that we are building the capacity, strengthening the capacity of our community-based partners, understanding that it's not just about us. It's about the vision of which they wish to see and how they are going to continue to lead their generation towards a more just and equitable world. So thank you all.
I love that. I love that. And thank you all for sharing your time and your wisdom. Give a digital round of applause to Mozetta and Gustavo and Pete and Nate. You guys are all brilliant and doing amazing work. And we are lucky to have you on this webinar sharing that with us all. And thanks to Jacob, who kicked us off with how data can tell a story that way. I really do think that it all starts with a story. And whether that story ends up in the press, whether that ends up coming from a legislator who gets to retell it, whether it gets passed along for generations, that's the thing that move us, right? Stories have moved us since the beginning of time, and they will continue to move us and they will continue to drive change. So I think, yeah, and all of these conversations have really reminded me of that. So thank you all for sharing that. Tracy, if you could share the slides again, we just have some fun little housekeeping at the end of this. Our next webinar will be July 25th. So mark your calendars. The theme for that is creating champions, how we build lasting relationships with community leaders through intentional education and advocacy. So whether that is a school principal, whether that's a legislator, whether that's a police chief, how do we create champions for our causes and build those lasting relationships like Nate was talking about too. Maybe it's with a local journalist as well. So that's our next webinar. Our next coalition meeting will be June 25th. That's happening in person in Memphis, Tennessee. So make sure to RSVP for that. There will be a virtual option as well for those that can't make it, but we always provide a great lunch, some live music from one of our advocates, and talk about all the things our coalition is doing from our 4 different committees and our multiple programs that stemmed as musicians, began as Musicians for Smoke-Free Tennessee, but now is a broad coalition working towards nicotine prevention and control. Let's see. I think there's a few little reminders here that CEU credits, certificates are available to those that would like them. So just shoot us an email after the fact. We will be following up with an email that includes the recording of this Zoom to all the people that RSVP'd and some collateral that our panelists may share to provide about storytelling and what they're doing. And as a reminder, our coalition is always welcoming new members. I know we get new faces on these webinars that aren't necessarily coalition members, and we'd love for you to join. We'd love for you to join one of our committees and get in the trenches with us because we're doing some good work and we'd love to work with you. And then we will be sending out in that follow-up email a vote on what our themes for next year's webinar should be. This next one will be the last one in our first year of webinars, and then we will send out probably 10 different topics and let you choose the top 4 for next year. So be sure to keep an eye out for that and weigh in because we want to be presenting information that is most relevant and important to you right now. I think that's about it. If you have any questions or want to get involved, hit us up, info@smokefreetennessee.com. We appreciate everybody tuning in today. Thanks to Tracy for helping us run the slides and tech behind the scenes, our coalition secretary. Thanks again to all of our panelists for being a part of this and sharing their wisdom. And thank you all for tuning in. We appreciate you, and let's keep working towards a smoke-free Tennessee together. Thanks, everybody.